so often, just when I'm alone, I can't help the longing I feel when he moans. He's a jag, he's a jag, he's a jag, you are. He's a jag, he's a jag, he's a jag, you are. He's a jag, he's a jag, he's a jag, you are. He's a jag, he's a jag, he's a jag, you are.
Hello, folks. You're listening to Revolution Radio here at freedomslips.com, and coming at you next, this is Kerry Cassidy with Whistleblower Radio, Project Camelot. So without much further ado, here's Kerry Cassidy. Take it away, Kerry.
Stretched out and turning, waiting for more strange shapes.
Hi there. This is Kerry Cassidy, Project Camelot, Whistleblower Radio, and hopefully you can hear me okay, and this is broadcasting properly. I'm sort of trying a different system here. Okay, so I'm very happy to be here tonight. I have a very fascinating guest, I must say, and his name is James Robert Wright, and I guess my dog is going to provide sound effects in the background here until I let him in the room. So anyway... Oh, God. Okay. Anyway, James, are you there?
Yes.
Okay, very good. And are you able to hear me okay?
Yeah, I'm hearing you just fine. What about you with me?
Okay, you're quite loud for me, but that doesn't matter. That doesn't mean for the board, it's all up to our producer, and if everything looks good to him, then we're good to go here. So I'm going to assume we're all good to go. It looks like we're getting the thumbs up. So I know you've been on other Revolution radio shows. I think you were on with Roxy Lopez not even that long ago. Is that right?
Yes, I did a show with Roxy. It was last year in LA.
Okay. I thought it was more recently than that, but at any rate, it's great to have you on the show, and I'm going to take a look at your bio here and see if I can, read it convincingly here for people. So let me say this, that James Robert Wright is a 32nd degree Mason, and he was, it looks like from what you sent me, you have this sort of diploma type thing. That means that you became one in 2008. And so then you basically are one, even to this day, even though you've, in a sense, backed out of the, I don't know if you consider yourself removed from the order. I know you're a whistleblower, but how would you classify that?
I would classify it very much like a divorce of spouses, in that, you separate from the environment and kind of go your own separate ways, and it's really not to their chagrin. They would sort of be like the classic caricature controlling male in the situation, but yeah, that's basically what, because there is no protocol on the books for a Mason leaving. I mean, it so rarely happens that what usually happens is they either fall through the cracks or just stop going, stop paying dues and all that, and, someone either comes along and tries to get them integrated back active in the system or not, and a lot of cases nowadays is not. So, but it really, that all hinges on how high up you went, because if you're just an apprentice or a fellow craft or whatever, and you kind of lose interest and quit going, then they're going to allow it. Whereas if you make it to 32nd, it's going to be a lot more difficult to separate from that. So that's when the attitude at that point becomes a lot like the mafia, to make a generalization. So. Oh, and by the way, I guess you were talking about Revolution Radio. I think the ones that you were thinking of recently were Freedom Slips, Granada Forum, and Third Phase of the Moon.
Okay. Well, let me go ahead and because I did a bunch of research on you, as I'm supposed to do when I do a radio show with someone, and I don't always have a chance to do it. you sent me a copy of your book, and I did get through some of it, and I'm going to ask you all sorts of questions about that. And I'm, very interested in all of this. And I think it's lovely that you did. Somehow we got in contact with each other, and that's just great. So what I'm going to do is just read this bio that you gave me for people, and then again, as is common with Camelot, I do have you on my Whistleblower radio, and you should be able to get that page by clicking on his, the line that describes him under his name. So anyway, James Robert Wright is 32nd degree Mason. He's 31 years old, resides in L.A., has held a variety of positions and decorations in Masonic lodges and the Scottish Rite, in keeping with preferred family customs. His ancestral roots can be traced back to the Spencer and St. Clair families, making him Princess Diana's cousin and William Sinclair of Rosalind's grandson. James has a background in entertainment production, emergency dispatch, IT support, and then preceding all of the formal employ as envoy to the Supreme Council in Washington, D.C. 5 years into being an actual Mason, up to 1 year with carte blanche, access to vaults and archives as a special assistant to the Secretary General. He unexpectedly uncovered some of the most shocking revelations about the so-called International Charitable Fraternal Service Organization. Now, having blown the whistle on the order, James currently finds himself on the front lines of truth and patriot movements, rallying public awareness on the nature of corruption and control prevalent in society that is directly tied to the Masonic cabal's vast, sweeping network. I think someone might call that a run-on sentence, but very well done. And then it says that he's appeared on over 100 radio shows and counting. He asserts taking these insidious blood oaths with the order and then holding public office or working in law enforcement constitutes the biggest conflict of interest the world has ever seen. So that's an interesting statement. I know that you must know Project Camelot, and so you know that I will be sort of delving in places that people don't normally ask you about and asking you questions that kind of might drive you a little crazy at the time, but might make sense later. Okay?
Oh, sure. Yeah, no, I like the idea of the spontaneity and just kind of winging it. And yeah.
Great. Okay. So at this moment, and I do hear a bit of an echo at your end. So that means your mic might be up a bit loud. I know mine is at least at halfway over here, which for radio is probably better because there tends to be an echo otherwise. So what I'd like you to do at this point is tell very briefly, if you can, what your sort of story was for the crux of the matter that you discovered. And in reading your book, I have to admit that I found some of it a bit vague. And maybe you have to be purposely vague. And I know you did do a very good nuts and bolts kind of blow by blow, but at the same time, there was a sense of, and I did listen a little bit to your interview with Roxy Lopez, and I noticed that sometimes your answers to questions don't go into the kind of depth that I'm really interested in. And so I'm going to ask you to sort of take the gloves off, so to speak. And, because of Camelot and how deep we go in this kind of thing, there's also a sort of burning question I have, which is whether you really had access to the kind of secrets that I am aware of. And that people who have studied Camelot and things like that, certainly you may know of Jordan Maxwell, who's gone down the rabbit hole in regard to the occult and, Knights Templar, Freemasons, and the like, and other people of that nature that in other words, we're going beyond the sort of superficial level. And I understand that, you had a job and so on and so forth. So I may tend to also jump around a bit, so just a fair warning on that.
Yeah, no, that's fine. And I mean, like, when you're talking about anybody at all that pursues this subject matter and tries to go down that rabbit hole, as you put it, and that's exactly what it is, it seems that there's two experiences that there are to be had. And one is when you actually are integrated into that system and have their trust and that access that they give you. And then there's being on the outside looking in, and it will produce completely different things for the person investigating. Now, of course, when I was in that environment, it's not like I was investigating. I mean, I was very much so a part of it and very content with it and their BS for a lot of years. And even prior to that, content with the BS as I experienced it in my own family. So, I mean, really, and it's difficult when you do radio, because even in a 2 or a 3 hour show, there's only so much between breaks and all that you can really delve into. So, I mean, to me, I feel like I wouldn't even be able to really broach all of this true subject matter and all of the different idiosyncrasies in it and everything without like maybe a 12-hour, platform, and it would be extremely exhausting. But whatever works to get the information out. So.
Okay, and fair enough. Okay, so at this moment, can you describe because I think people do have so I'm going to assume that people understand to some degree what it means to be involved on the level that you were involved in. In other words, they might have heard other shows or this or that, and we can bring in details as we go. But I'd like to kind of jump right into it. It's sort of like in sort of the middle of the pool, so to speak, and say, get what happened to make you really know that something was deeply wrong and decide to kind of become a whistleblower.
Well, it was a series of things, one after another, and then, of course, working in an increasingly hostile work environment, and the reasons why it was hostile, there were no good reasons, actually, let me say. It was just these egotistical, power-tripping, self-absorbed guys who run that Supreme Council, and it was like the more you were around them, behind closed doors, relaxed, casual, the more they would show their true colors and behave like the way that they really are as people, and not this public presentation, ribbon-cutting image. And the more that I was exposed to that, the longer that I was in that position, the more unbearable it became. And, I mean, it became so unbearable that, like I wrote in the book, there were times when I was brought to a point where I was breaking down in tears, right there in the office. It was just so much. And just these ogres and the way that they treat people. And then, you have to understand also in talking about this, that these men who run Freemasonry, and I mean that in the context of whether we're talking about the Grand Lodge of any given state, or the Supreme Council of the Scottish Rite, or United Grand Lodge of England, they did not get to where they are by being nice and doing things the right way and the correct way and ethically and everything else. They got there by a lot of throat-cutting, backstabbing, and it just, it's downhill from there. And to put it into perspective, like you mentioned, if you run with their official statement that there's currently about 5 million Masons in America, then I was one of roughly 75 thereabouts that was actually on payroll, getting a paycheck, and on this administrative staff of the entire monster. So there's obviously, with what I have come out about, a lot of Masons who have a problem with what I'm doing. And to me, I look at their problem with me very cynically, because to me, it's like I already know for a fact that you may try to sit there and suck up to the place and say what you feel you need to say to defend it and to be a quote unquote good Mason, but at the end of the day, the fact is that you will never, as a Mason, get to where I was. And that was largely in part to being bloodline, which so many of them are bloodline, and they track that, even though they will not admit to this, but they do. And that's precisely what the Masonic chip program for kids is all about, in a related story. But yeah, no, it's of the talent pool that was in the ranks of Freemasonry at the time I was coming up through it, there was no one else with a better genealogy and background than mine. And I'm not trying to say that to be smug, I'm just stating it as it is.
Yeah, and I can see that, actually. If you are related indeed to Diana Spencer and you are a St. Clair, that is, that's pretty high up in terms of what you call genealogy, I guess. So you started out with a, sort of on a pedestal, or with a leg up, as they say, and you also were employed, right?
Yes, I became employed years later after being a quote good Mason and going through various seats, officer positions in my mother lodge and then the other Blue Lodge that I joined as well. And they really liked my work ethic and my talent for the subject matter and everything else, and how well I could soak it in, et cetera, et cetera. And so that, they came and headhunted me, selected me, and brought me into that position it was the month before my birthday, so April of 2010. And I also should note that no one had ever been brought on the Supreme Council, administrative, payroll, all that, like I was, under the age of 50, and I was brought on right before my 28th birthday. So it was unprecedented, and it really sent a lot of shockwaves through the ranks. And I think a lot of what I dealt with, as far as the general negativity being directed at me on a daily basis, really all boils down to like a sort of jealousy.
Right. Well, okay. But being let in, as you say, on that level, you had turned, it's according to the diploma type thing you sent me, it said in 2008 you became a 32nd degree Mason, correct?
Correct. That's when I got the rank of 32nd and went through those degrees, and it was 2010 when I was actually hired.
Okay, yeah, because that's an important distinction. Okay. I am very interested in sort of the dynamics of what you were encountering, and I'm not going to mean to insult you here, but I want you to be sort of analytical about this, and I'm sure you've had a zillion, hours to think about all the whole dynamics of everything. But I would like to find out, when you had this sort of, you said you went on to a rooftop with, and I forget his actual title, the guy, but I guess he was sort of your boss, right? And
yes.
You had a drink with him, and then after that, he kind of gave you more free reign, and that seemed to increase the jealousy around you.
Yes, that's a good summing up of that, yeah.
Okay. There was an interesting dynamic that went on where, he sort of said he loved you and he hugged you and he worried that you might take it the wrong way, kind of thing, right?
Yes, and later on, after everything hit the fan, then he actually came over to he met me at my aunt's house in Dallas and proceeded to, in a living room far, far back in the back corner of the house. I mean, it's like a 5,000 square foot house, so it's pretty large. And he actually full blown came on to me at that point and told me that he would protect me from what was going on and the way that I was being targeted and all that. And I was so appalled by it because, one, I have pretty strong ethics, and I knew we had such a close professional relationship that I was very well acquainted with his wife, and for him to want for me to go there with him, I just think was really asking a lot. And it's something that I would not be able to do with my standards. And I expressed that to him, and then his attitude basically turned on me.
Right. But, what I'm very interested, I mean, from the description in your book, there's definitely this sort of almost male monk cloistered aspect to all of it, where you get all these sort of backbiting, jealous, kind of gay games, if you will. And I'm just wondering, at what point were you naive? I mean, I understand you were gay, and it seems like you were aware of your gayness in sort of an outgoing kind of a way, at least for a number of years prior to this, right?
Oh, yeah. I exited the closet as a junior in high school. Yeah.
Right. So what I mean by this is that it almost seems, hard to believe that there would be any naivete on your part, at least, and certainly shouldn't have been on his. Isn't that correct?
Well, yeah, but I mean, again, this guy we were so close. I mean, he would go out of town with his wife and have me house sit his house and
right.
drive his car, and full access in the Scottish Rite office with his computer passwords and all that kind of stuff. So there was an enormous level of trust between us. And yet I did not know that he had this propensity for having affairs with younger guys from Masonry. And, when I had that revelation and he came on to me, I did my own homework on this subject and consequently found out that, yeah, there was another guy that was my age. We almost looked like we could be twins, that he was already having a relationship with like that. And it's, to me, it's just very sick. I don't understand how people, one, can cheat on their spouse, and two, be the person that they're doing the cheating with and then looking with a straight face at the spouse. I just, that's not in me to do. And that was why I rejected it.
Okay. And I think this is interesting to people because, you must appreciate that the Illuminati, I assume that the information out there that talks about how Illuminati children are raised, that talks about the abuse, sexual and otherwise, that talks about the very satanic rituals that they are put through, and so on. And you came up in an Illuminati family. I don't know. I can't remember whether you had abuse as a child, but maybe you can let me know about that. But you know what I'm saying? In other words, why? It almost seems like a no-brainer that this would go on. It seems like all this backbiting and jealousy on a professional level does have this sort of subterranean male, jealous, sexual kind of game playing going on. And at the same time that you would completely be aware of that at your age, you know what I'm saying? Having grown up and been, especially in our society now where gayness is pretty openly acknowledged. And it sounds like you live in LA and you work in the entertainment or have worked in the entertainment industry, at least at some point. Yeah,
I mean, what do you want me to answer first with all? There's several things that you just said. I'm sorry, it's kind of a long, yeah, I know it's a long question.
Well, let's first of all bite off the idea that there is a way that Illuminati children are brought up that goes in part and parcel with the philosophy of the Illuminati. And are you not familiar with that? And did you yourself experience that?
Yes, my family back in Dallas is tremendously sick. At one point in time, they were the wealthiest, most powerful family in town. And that is to say, like, as one example, during the Great Depression, we were the only construction that was going on in the city of Dallas, and it was going on two of our houses on the most prestigious, sought-after street in Dallas. And if that's any kind of a clue. And I was subjected to tremendously disturbing, sick, nasty, both emotional and spiritual abuse. I was never, and verbal abuse, I might add. I was never sexually abused, but the rest of it, I mean, it was just, there was bizarre rituals that I was, right there in the midst of. My parents would kill and sacrifice cats in their backyard with their other friends from the Temple of Set, which is kind of, I piss off OTO people if I say this, but, you think of it like the OTO. It's not, but it's that kind of a ritualistic sex magic and everything else type of organization. And that's what they belong to.
So you grew up with this, right?
Yes.
Okay. And was there any question in your mind that this would not continue to be part of the backdrop, so to speak, once you joined sort of on the more inner levels and even climbed the ladder as a Mason?
No, because I bought into the lie that, I was going to be exposed to these guys who were revered as like the pillars of the community back there in Texas and all that, and there must be good guys in there somewhere, and ergo I would find myself in nicer, more relaxed, healthy environments once I made that a priority in my life, and such was not the case. I thought wrong.
Okay. Were you actually, because I saw a lot about Texas in there, I didn't see, were you in Washington, D.C., or was it just that you were associated with Washington, D.C.?
Associated. My paychecks came from D.C. I was stationed there at the Dallas Scottish Rite building.
Okay, yeah. So, and when you, this is just a small detail, but, and I'm trying to think back about this, but my understanding was that there was another rite prior to, I forget what it's called, but prior to the Scottish Rite, there was another rite that was in charge of Freemasonry.
York Rite?
Yes. Did that transition happen before you were given 32nd degree Masonry, or, you know what I'm saying? Because there was a transition in the last 10 years.
Right. No, I mean, the York Rite is obviously very much so alive and well, but that's part of the skullduggery that's going on with the Scottish Rite, is that they seek to take that over. Because when you're initiated as an apprentice, you are at that point a York Rite Mason. A Blue Lodge in your local neighborhood is York Rite.
Okay, we'll continue this. There is a break coming, and thank you very much. We'll be right back with James Wright.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
He wants a challenge. Let's give him one.
The voice that whispers in your ears are the screams that you fear. The mind you cannot defy is the heart that rules mankind. The people who made you are the gods that will save you. And I am Steve Travesty. I am the voice. The ghost in the machine. Ghost in the Machine, Tuesdays, 8 p.m., Studio A.
Right here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, where information never sleeps.
Hi, this is the voice known as Tammy Pepperman. Have you ever thought about how this seems like a farm? The food comes with daily recommended allowance, just like any other farm animal. If you get out of line, you get prodded, slapped, or killed if you're too much liability. And if you are not earning your keep, you can find yourself in prison for non-payment of taxes or child support. If you're tired of being farm product, join us every Thursday night from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Studio B, and Saturday, 6 to 8 p.m. on Studio B, right here on Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com.
Is your data safe? Do you have the necessary information to assist you in confidently living through just about any survival situation? Is survival and gardening, off-grid living, medical knowledge, or even natural or man-made EMPs on your list of personal concerns? Do you have your documents and your personal information in a safe place in your hands where you know where it is? Well, check out our preloaded EMP-proof thumb drive. Over 3 gigs of survival documents and how-tos, plus the USDA offline food preservation website, and much, much more, including a surprise bonus we just can't tell you about here. With plenty of room left over to store your most important documents. Imagine if a megavirus or a computer failure took out your bank, or all the banks for that matter. Are your banking records safe in your hands? So when they get things fixed and repaired, you can say, hey, look, this is what I had. You have it. I want it back. Is your personal data saved? Family records, addresses, phone numbers? Well, squeeze on over to freedomslips.com. Yes, that's www.freedomslips.com. Click the banner on the homepage for the EMP-proof bullet drive to get the full scoop of everything that we offer. So, folks, keep your data safe for your peace of mind. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here.
Our hero claims a warrior's heart. I tell you, the Dragonborn comes with a voice wielding power of the ancient Lord Earth. Believe, the Dragonborn comes.
Hi there, this is Kerry Cassidy, Project Camelot, Whistleblower Radio, and we're talking to James Robert Wright all about the, Scottish Rite and the Freemasons and his experience working for them, as well as having been a 32nd degree Mason, etc. So, James, are you there?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Now, right before the break, you were explaining the difference between the Scottish and the other Rite.
The York.
The York, right? Yeah. The reason I bring this up is because Dan Burish, one of my witnesses that I interviewed a number of times, as you may recall, did talk about a transition that happened back a few years ago in which things were supposedly handed over to the Scottish Rite. Were you aware of that?
Yes, there were always rumors circulating quietly, like in the water cooler chat in the lodges that I would go to, and I went to quite a lot of Blue Lodges there in Texas. And they used to refer to it as the quiet war inside Freemasonry. And actually a good friend of mine, Frater X, he classifies it like that as well, and we agree on all that. It's basically an instance of big business taking over the more fundamental grassroots component of Freemasonry. And when you say Scottish Rite, you're talking about that Supreme Council in D.C. People like Ronald Seal, S. Brent Morris, Arturo de Hoyos, the guys down in Texas and Houston in a little lodge called Tranquility Lodge, which has some strong ties to NASA, we'll just say. Yeah, those are the ones that are running this Scottish Rite takeover agenda. And it's so evident because most Masons in any major city will be able to vouch for the fact that when they go to their neighborhood Blue Lodge meetings now, why is it that they have these officials from the local Scottish Rite Valley that are there calling the shots. When you want to talk about Masonic protocol and Grand Lodge York Rite law, it's Masonically illegal, quote unquote, for them to do that. The Scottish Rite is not supposed to cross any lines. So from their own, everybody's behavior on the Supreme Council the last, I'd say, 15 years thereabout, it's all enough to warrant them being Masonically suspended or expelled or whatever they want to call it. But yet that's not happening. So obviously there is complacency in the York Rite to even allow this to happen to begin with. So that is the nature of the beast with that.
Okay, well, I mean, I appreciate you're calling it complacency. I might term it differently. From what I understood, it is in essence, a sort of handover, that it was an agreement made a long time ago, and that they have to honor it. They have no choice, but they may be reluctant to admit it or to sort of let go of their power, as power, is pretty insidious. And
well, no, that's true, and I think the reason for that is because they know just as well as anyone else that's from this environment that none of the guys on the street, the Masons who make up the vast majority of the membership, your everyday working class guys across the world who just, maybe they're a master Mason in a lodge and that's it. They would never sit idly by and just allow that to happen overnight. So it's been, a very quiet, hostile takeover, you could say.
Okay, fair enough. So I guess we're getting a little off topic, but it is kind of interesting, and there may be some reason to go into that a bit deeper later. But so where I was going with everything was that you sort of became part of this, but at the same time you were raised in what some people may term even a typical Illuminati-esque family, but where these kinds of things were going on, as you were saying. In a sort of twisted way. Savali is a whistleblower from way back. Are you familiar with the Savali testimony?
I do think I have heard that at some point, but lately I've been so inundated with information, I'm kind of on overload. Please remind me a little bit about it.
Well, it's a woman who was raised in an Illuminati family who became, I guess, was very involved in all of that, and I think I guess you've stated that women don't go into the Rite the same way that men do, but she somehow became a huge whistleblower, and there's just hours and hours and hours of testimony, some of which is on Project Camelot, if you do a search, but you can certainly find it by just doing your search on the web, and Savali is Svali. But she really kind of blew the whistle and broke, I think, open that whole saga in terms of abuse and so on. And I've interviewed a number of people like this, like her, and other people are coming forward all the time reporting these kinds of things. So now it's fairly, at least in my sector, commonplace knowledge. So with that background, I understand you grew up and you certainly had still maintained some degree of these illusions of joining, I guess, a men's club in which you would progress up a ladder, maybe in terms of your career and other kind of ways in society where you would be treated honorably and not further abused, so to speak. And, it is interesting that a person can maintain that viewpoint and grow up the way you did. Can you talk about that? Because I think, in a sense, you're not that old. It may be actually part of your generation that kids are going through things that are absolutely appalling, and yet at the same time keeping some kind of part of them believing in this illusory world of, a utopian vision in a certain sense.
Right. I mean, I think initially it was really to me just like, oh, okay, it's another one of these things that is just expected of me and I need to go do. Kind of like as a teenager, I was put through cotillion, aka finishing school, and I went through all that stuff at Lakewood Country Club in Dallas, where I was a companion beau, which is the male equivalent of a debutante. So by the age of 23, I had this outlook on life that everything was, to be categorized as this, that, or the other in league with that sort of Dallas socialite society life. And I figured, again, wrongly, that this would just be another thing, another cog in that wheel. And I mean, on the surface, you could say, yeah, it is, but then you rise higher, you go through the rabbit hole and all that, and then you wind up in a place that's not at all what you might have thought. I mean, I suppose had I been a person that listened to the more conspiratorial type subject matter and everything at that age, then perhaps I might have had different inklings or something, but that's not the way it all came down the pike, so. All
right. Do you feel that that there is any missing time or areas of your childhood that you may actually not really remember correctly?
Oh yeah, I've got a ton of missing time from back then. I mean, we had so many traumatic events in my family, one after the other, I would say a majority of which were suicides, that it almost, I mean, you go through that type stuff enough and eventually you get to a point where it's like changing the radio station. You just tune it automatically out and you just go on like a robot regardless of how disgusting and tumultuous your surroundings are. Yeah.
Okay. So given that, and given that you got into this sort of predicament in a way, you got very deep in along this road, and at a certain point you were, I guess, aware that you were being targeted in a certain way at your job within this organization. But at the same time, there were some things that a person has to say to you. Well, first of all, did you believe the Satanist philosophy, and why?
No. Now, in that environment, they make a very clear division. They don't like to use the S word. They like to say Luciferian. And, of course, they come at you with all of this inundative material, like their own writings and books from Albert Pike and all that sort of stuff, and explain to you that, no, this is really about the liberation of man's mind and the triumph of philosophy over ignorance and blah, blah, blah. But, I mean, at the end of the day, the fact of the matter is that Blue Lodges try to put on an image that they are Christian because they will have a Holy Bible on their altar. But that is a gross misconception about the order, because actually if you were, let's say, Church of Satan, Anton LaVey is your faith, or you were Aleister Crowley, Holy Books of Thelema as your faith, then the lodge will very happily, with a smile on their faces, put those pieces of literature on their altar for you to take your oaths on. It's right. Whatever you have your faith in. So there is no definition of faith, and the words Jesus Christ do not come up anywhere in the writings of Freemasonry or anything. Matter of fact, that's what the whole story of Hiram Abiff around the master's degree and the widow's son motif and all of that, that's actually a mirroring of the Jesus, almost Osirian birth, death, rebirth, ascension motif. And they're very, very particular to never label it Christ.
Okay. Then, do you know who Thomas Aquinas is?
Saint Thomas Aquinas?
No. Okay, maybe I have his No, Michael Aquino. Do you know who he is?
I don't believe so, no.
Okay. Do you know who Douglas Dietrich is?
It sounds familiar. I'm just not placing it at the moment. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
Well, he worked, as a sort of investigative librarian in a way, among other things, for this high-level Mason whose name is Michael Aquino, and they reside in San Francisco, and he worked at the Presidio. Are you familiar with the Presidio in San Francisco and its occult history?
No, I'm familiar with stuff in the LA area, but I've never actually been up to NorCal yet, so.
Okay. Oh, interesting. All right. Okay. That's interesting. It would be sort of fascinating if you were to probably talk to Douglas Dietrich at some point. Maybe I can get you in contact. At any rate, he's something of a whistleblower, if you would, for what went up there. So in your experience, you were brought into this philosophy, you kind of bought into the rationale, and then you had, during this time in your book, you actually described sort of an experience that had to do with a discarnate entity, possibly you want to call him a ghost, that seemed to also factor in on later events.
Yeah, I mean, really, the whole point in my telling of that particular story was to illustrate how these guys, the Scottish Rite especially, they want to sit there and act like and tell people and make public statements that, oh, there's nothing to see here, move along, there's nothing occultic going on, those are all lies, and people trying to discredit us and blah, 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 and that's just not the truth. The truth of the matter is if you're in that little in crowd at the Scottish Rite, then when the doors close and lock at 9, 10 o'clock p.m., there are still things that go on in those buildings through all hours of the night, but you're just not told about it unless you're not in that in crowd. So, yeah, they love the seances and the Ouija board stuff and all of it. They like to experiment with different pieces of ritual that you're not going to see practice openly in the Scottish Rite, like the Golden Dawn stuff, for example. That's probably the unanimous favorite with those guys, is the Solomonic Magic, Crowley, Rigardi magic material.
Right. And just so you know, I have studied this material, so I'm fairly knowledgeable about it. Although I never practiced this kind of thing, I was very interested to study it when I was younger. So it has helped me to understand the motivations of a lot of these people that get very deeply into the Masonic Lodge and into Satanism, Luciferianism, etc. Okay, so you yourself, though, were not. Let me not put words in your mouth here. But it sounds like you're saying that you were not into this philosophy so deeply, because when you had this sort of schism happen, which you're saying happened sort of in general, but not any specific incident, if I get you right, you didn't have trouble breaking away because you hadn't completely bought into it in the first place. I mean, can you kind of describe where you were with that?
Yeah, the first and foremost reason why I was there for that stuff was because they used to call me the intendant of the building, which is the name of the 8th degree in the Scottish Rite, actually. So it was like a little Masonic ha-ha play on words, meaning that I was the guy that was there on staff and had all of the skeleton keys to the building and the alarm codes and blah, 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 blah. So I was the enabler for these guys to come in the middle of the night and do these things and play their little parlor games with the spirits and all the stuff that they love to do. And that's why I was expected to be there, which was to, be basically the key master, if you will. But you know, a lot of them would ask me to participate, and here, hold the, you know, and they had all the devices like the stuff you see on the ghost hunter shows and all that, like things that do temperature readings and the EVPs and all that stuff, and they would try to get me to, you know, help them use the equipment and all that kind of stuff. And I was just very bored with it all. I'm of the mindset personally that, you know, you shouldn't go around playing with stuff like that. It's just not a good idea. And so I kind of would always take a back seat, but I was still nonetheless exposed to it. And like the dead body that they keep there in the building, they keep that for the use in the 31st degree Inspector Inquisitor. And rather than go out to like Norcosco or another stage supplier, they actually have a real mummified corpse that they parade around the stage, and no one in the audience going through the degrees 4 through 32 are the wiser. And it's really stupid. And they'll sit there and deny that they do that in the Scottish Rite Valleys, but then they'll turn right around and admit freely that they do it in D.C. with Albert Pike's body. So, again, you have this sort of hypocrisy that always comes out whenever a Mason's mouth is moving, you know, trying to defend themselves. And that was the way that all kind of just went down in a nutshell.
Okay, but I'm still not hearing how it is that this schism happened, because you seem to have sort of drunk the Kool-Aid, so to speak, gone down the road for a very long time, had the missing time. Did you have some kind of, you know, I don't know, eyes wide open type of experience where, aside from the sort of come on by the person that was, you know, you were working for, and the dislike around you, or the jealousy that manifested as dislike, and this backbiting kind of thing. In other words, what was a transition point to put you in a place where you become a whistleblower?
It was just the sheer intensity of it and the realization that there was no better reason for any of what was going on than it seemed to be for their own sick pleasure. And I know that that's an overused statement with a lot of things and a lot of people, but that is what it was. It was them basically torturing me, whether that was working me 90 hours a week with no exceptions, or, you know, threatening me with my job if I didn't comply, just the hostility, the name-calling things that were being said behind my back that were getting back to me, vulgar things. I'm not talking about like, you know, oh, that bastard or no, that just all of it combined, it became where I could not do it anymore. And they actually had a doctor at that point that was keeping me on a, you know, ongoing prescription of amphetamine pills just so I could keep up with the demands they were making of me. And all that stuff combined, I just crashed. I could not deal with it anymore. It got to, I mean, these are guys who, you know, they present themselves as these pillars of the community, and they're all so wonderful, and they're so successful and so educated and intelligent and blah, blah, blah. But really, they behave like you said. That was actually the best summing up I've ever heard. Like a bunch of, I mean, I'm changing the words here slightly, but like a cackle of gay men who were jealous and fighting. And and I just, I mean, it got so bad. I don't even know that I can quite put it into words. It was just the most awful thing in my life I'd ever dealt with, and that's saying something considering the family I come from.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so we can say it's cumulative, but at some point you kind of recognized once and for all the sort of self-serving nature of what they were involved with, and the fact that they were two-faced, and this became too much for sort of your sense of honor, which sounds like you had a real, somehow had survived all of what you'd been through, some kind of sense of honor about yourself.
Yeah, because in the end, what I bought into the most and really had my Masonic faith in, so to speak, was the whole Knights Templar thing. That really meant a lot to me because I have a very strong background of Templars in my family, and I was always I'm still into the romantic ideas of that sort of simple time period of medieval times, and the honor and the valor and the all of it. That really is a really cool concept to me, and I think the world would be a better place if it was still practiced like it was then. But that's beside the point. And so you could say that it was like my religion, it was my castle, and for them to be behaving the ways that they were in an ever increasing manner, then it was extremely devastating to watch.
Right. Now, at this time, before you became a whistleblower, did you have anybody come forward who was aware of your, pain and suffering? Okay, we've got a commercial here, and you're going to have to answer me on the other side of the hour. So
sure.
If you'll just, everyone stay tuned, and we'll be right back. Thank you.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
The New Life Expo invites you to join us April 7th to the 12th for a magical expo at sea. As intuitive readers, healers, exhibitors, and the world's greatest speakers ask you to come along on a cruise of enlightenment to Jamaica and the Caribbean. People like Gail Thackeray, Kerry Cassidy, Dr. Norm Shealy, Judy Satori, Susan Shumsky, Victoria of Light, Light Uberud, Maureen St. Germain, and Sean David Morton, along with many, many more. Imagine being with like-minded souls in an expo community for 6 glorious days and 5 mysterious nights. Enter a world of unlimited possibilities. Practice yoga, enjoy exotic foods, perform sacred ceremonies with island elders, and explore the beaches, jungles, and waterfalls of magnificent Jamaica. Space is limited, and special deals will expire soon. Register now at newlifecruise.com. That's newlifecruise.com. Mention The Sean at Strange Universe Radio and receive a free guided meditation CD as a special gift. Just our way of saying thank you. Don't miss this amazing event as we sail into higher consciousness and a new beginning in 2014.
Revolution Radio.
You don't see it, do you? How close we are to absolute chaos? The sick ones are sitting on their fat asses, eating and drink themselves into a stupor, polluting the world without a second thought while it goes down the toilet. Nobody wants to do the nasty work. You know, the shit that we all just think about. Most good citizens are just along for the ride and then bitch and moan and complain about everything when it doesn't work out.
Not me.
Get it done.
Revolution Radio, where we do the nasty work. www.freedomslips.com.
You need some more speed records in this day and age. You need coverage.
Coverage? Oh, you mean them little root weevils that crawl around popping off cameras in your face?
Those root weevils write history.
Many of you know that quote by Jack Nicholson in A Few Good Men, "You can't handle the truth." Well, you can, and Event Horizons will give you those truths. So when you're mad as hell and not going to take it anymore from that memorable senior network, you'll know just what to do. We will draw you in and become your news addiction at Event Horizons. Join us Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to noon Eastern Time at freedomslips.com at Revolution Radio. Our world team members are Dennis Fetcho, John Ilias, David Dunger, Hyla Cass, MD, Melanie Bridgeton, Jim Mars, Paula Harris, John Trallo, Maria Payan, Christopher Husser, DODDS, Jonathan Orchard, and me, your anchor, Dr. Robin Falco.
If you decide not to volunteer, it will not be held against you in any way.
Sounds dangerous.
It is. Very dangerous.
Count me in.
And that's right here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, where information never sleeps.
Enjoy your extra big-ass fries.
You didn't give me no fries. I got an empty box.
Would you like another extra big-ass fries?
I said I didn't get any.
Thank you. Your account has been charged. Your balance is 0. Please come back when you can afford to make a purchase.
No.
I'm sorry you're having
trouble.
trouble.
Come on. My kids are starving.
Thank you for tuning in to Revolution Radio. Here at Revolution Radio, we believe in freedom of ideas, freedom of speech, but above all, we believe in freedom of existence through self-reliance. This station is 100% listener-supported, and as a fundraising promotion, I have a kick-ass free gift for a $100 donation. 35,000 seeds. 25 years in the freezer. Long-term storable, 54 different varieties. So if food prices go crazy, the shit hits the fan, or if you just want to save tons of money every year by creating your own food like I do, grab our seed pack special. Just look for the banner on the homepage at freedomslips.com. Don't be a statistic. Don't be part of the problem. Be part of the solution. We need, as humans, to start taking care of ourselves and not depending on the megacorps to provide unhealthy, nasty food. Included in this package is also a DVD with 900 survival and off-grid living documents and the offline home canning how to do everything website all on the DVD. So when you're growing all that food, you know how to can it, store it, preserve it, etc. with all these documents. So thank you for tuning in to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. I hope that you will pick up this package and start learning to be free. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, where information never sleeps and freedom is one seed that needs to be planted.
What we do it live. It goes in eternity.
Is your data safe? Do you have the necessary information to assist you in confidently living through just about any survival situation? Is survival and gardening, off-grid living, medical knowledge, or even natural or man-made EMPs on your list of personal concerns? Do you have your documents and your personal information in a safe place in your hands where you know where it is? Well, check out our preloaded EMP-proof thumb drive. Over 3 gigs of survival documents and how-tos, plus the USDA offline food preservation website, and much, much more, including a surprise bonus we just can't tell you about here. With plenty of room left over to store your most important documents. Imagine if a megavirus or a computer failure took out your bank, or all the banks for that matter. Are your banking records safe in your hands? So when they get things fixed and repaired, you can say, hey, look, this is what I had. You have it. I want it back. Is your personal data safe? Family records, addresses, phone numbers? Well, squeeze on over to freedomslips.com. Yes, that's www.freedomslips.com. Click the banner on the homepage for the EMP-proof bullet drive to get the full scoop of everything that we offer. So, folks, keep your data safe for your peace of mind. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here.
Get off your knees. Recognize who you are. Begin to push the envelope of your potentiality. We are more than we give ourselves credit for. And multiple on and off-world races have a vested interest in seeing that you don't learn the truth. Our destiny is in the stars. We come from the stars, and we will return to the stars. Never forget who you are. Own your sovereignty. Regain your birthright. Listen to the truth tellers. Listen to the whistleblowers.
Hi, this is Kerry Cassidy, Project Camelot Whistleblower Radio, and we are talking to James Robert Wright, a whistleblower and a very brave individual, I have to say. It takes a lot of courage to do what he's doing, so just want to highlight that at this moment. James, are you still with us?
Yes.
Okay, so right before the break, I asked you a question. I wonder if you can answer it.
Sure. Can you say the question again, please?
Okay, I was afraid you'd ask me that. Okay. Actually, I don't remember. I believe that I was, in essence, we were still talking about sort of the crux of the matter as to how you became a whistleblower. And I had kind of said to you, was there anyone who had come forward during that time who saw your sort of state of mind and your travail and came to your aid or supported you in any way that might have helped to influence you to come down this road?
Well, that's kind of complicated. On face value, no. Because in this environment of Freemasonry, they have this little rule in their precious Masonic law, which says that you are not allowed to criticize Freemasonry publicly or privately. So my efforts to actually, before I did all this, I tried to seek help from the proper officials, both in the Grand Lodge of Texas and the Scottish Rite Supreme Council, and it was just met with complete futility. They just wanted to sweep it all under the rug and continue to allow what was going on to go on and expected me to continue to tolerate it. So that was a problem. And then I have lots of friends even still who are Masons who secretly, quietly kind of root me on and believe in what I'm doing. They've got their own hangups or whatever in the system, but they don't have the whatever you want to call it. I don't want to put labels on it. They are friends of mine to stand up and actually voice complaints and try to achieve something for the positive. Because as a former Supreme Council official, let me tell you, there's no way possible, I know now, to fix what's wrong with Freemasonry and all of these problems and the attitudes and everything that are the nature of the evil in it. There's no way to fix that from the inside. It's going to have to be done from the outside. Freemasonry is going to have to be fixed by a public hand, much like the 1800s Morgan affair, where you had the rise of this anti-Masonic party and they were almost run out of existence. So without something like that, I think JFK's speech in 61 summed it up pretty well. There is no need for a free and open society to have these secret societies in it. There's just not. And even in that Masonic environment, these scholars and everybody who are so entrenched in the history of the place and everything, they cannot argue that there's a need for all of that. They can't even come up with a reason why women aren't allowed. And, at the end of the day, it's very simple, the reason. It's called sexism and racism. It's still the only place that openly practices segregation anywhere in the world. Well, that's not a third world country, I should say. it's just the list goes on and on and on of all the wrongdoings that are perpetuated every day by this place, and I don't understand how people are tolerating it at all. I mean,
right. I would say the Vatican is a similar environment, but people clearly tolerate that as well. I mean, people within the order, so to speak, kind of shut up and put up with a great deal. But I do think mind control plays a great part. So when I'm asking you these questions, I'm sort of wondering whether or not you have subjected yourself to any kind of, I guess you might say, therapy. Have you done any past life regression? Are you aware of your prior lives?
No, I would actually like to explore that. I think that there's something that I could probably learn for the better from doing that sort of thing. In the meantime, I've just done, some mainstream therapy and some religious counseling and that sort of thing. But, to break all that programming, which I think the traumas they were putting me through is what initially broke the programming. And I was programmed because my oldest, dearest friends back in Dallas, once I was in the groove of that job with the Scottish Rite, I mean, they were making comments to me all the time through text messages or what have you, where are you? It's like you fell off the face of the earth. What's going on? Well, I'm working. Well, it's a Sunday. Don't you ever get a day off? Well, no, I don't. And it just, the whole place, and by their own admission. See, here again, you have a subject matter that Masons love to lie about. The fact is, in I think it was 85, 86, Fred Kleinecht, one of the former Sovereign Grand Commanders, in some of his writings, he wrote some books, freely, openly admitted that they fund mind control research at Stanford and over at a place in Armenia as well, under that time Soviet rule. But yeah, these are all open, brazen admissions that their own officials have made in the past, and now whenever it comes up, they want to backtrack and act like, oh no, that doesn't go on, or whatever. Like there was an incident pretty well known where a Masonic official was being interviewed many, many, many years ago by Art Bell, and they brought up the whole thing about Albert Pike in Morals and Dogma, Albert Pike being the, quote, father of the Scottish Rite, their own words for the guy. His body is kept in the House of the Temple in D.C. That, that was a forgery. He never said that it was Luciferian, or it's a bold-faced lie. When these Masons say things like that, they are lying. And that's what the oaths prescribe for you to do. They tell you that you had better lie rather than tell the truth to the public.
Right. Okay, well, absolutely. Okay, so, but at this point, you've written this book, and we've got, let me say this, we've got a whole slew of questions here that are coming through in the chat, and I acknowledge those questions. I'm going to try to get to them. I want to try to get a little bit further down this road before we take the questions, just to sort of make sure that there's as much exposed here in a logical fashion so that people understand kind of your trajectory, and then we can kind of branch out from there. You were inspired by what is, in essence, you said, the Knights Templar story, and you also told me that you kind of climbed this ladder of Freemasonry and took the tests that then make you a 32nd degree Mason. So you must have studied the literature, and you were very good at it, in a sense, and so you passed all the tests, correct?
Correct, yes. I really soaked the information in well and rather rapidly. I mean, some guys it takes years and years for them to go through each degree, and I went through them pretty fast. I mean, from an apprentice to a 32nd in a matter of like 3 years.
Okay.
That was pretty good.
Right. And on a certain level, it also meant that you bought into what you were reading, or you had to. I mean, there has to be a level of belief in order for you to really get by, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the world certainly is not without authors that were Masons who wrote some really good pieces on the metaphysical. For example, Manly P. Hall. I think he's a very intelligent guy that wrote some great books, and
Sure.
and others like that. But again, here you have a situation now where Freemasonry is trying to say presently that, oh, no, that's not us. We don't do that. Well, but your own books say that you do, from your own authors who hold your own ranks. So, I mean, and you might note, Kerry, that they have not yet, in 2 years of doing what I've been doing, they have not engaged me publicly, because they know that I could shoot them down and call them out on all their lies, and so they just refuse to address it. The only thing that they do to me publicly is they send the trolls after me,
Right.
to say ridiculous things like, oh, he's not a Mason. Oh, where's the proof? Where's the proof? Well, there's a lot of people out there who claim that they're a Illuminati whistleblower or from a Illuminati family or blah, 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 but I've got the proof of that in spades. Wouldn't you say?
Okay. Yeah. No, I mean, I don't have a problem with that, and but I do appreciate. Of course, they always try to do this, and Camelot is exposed to all these kinds of tactics as well.
Oh, I'm sure.
So, but you are in this position where you've written this book, you've exposed a certain level, but you really haven't revealed sort of the down and dirty. It doesn't even, whereas you said you had the keys to the castle, so to speak, they were performing, I assume, rituals late at night. They were doing, you called them seances. I imagine they're also, you're talking on a very surface level because, maybe they're not attacking you in public, but what we're not discussing is the fact that they must be attacking you on the etheric level, in terms of the non-physical. They must be going after you with their magics and their spells and their magicians. In other words, they're going.
So of all the constant ongoing threats that I receive from various individuals from that environment, yes, those have been some of the threats, that they're going to use sorcery against me, or I'm going to sustain magical attacks or whatever. Well, you know what? I studied in those environments as well, and I don't practice that stuff. But what I will say is I have the belief that I believe what I'm doing is that of a light worker, and I do not believe that so-called magic attacks can have any effect on someone who is in the right and in that light and doing it and promoting it truly and all that. And they've tried a lot of stuff, both in the physical, I've got private detectives that trail me everywhere I go. Even still, they keep constant tabs on me. My phones have been tapped. Right. Since I walked out of the building, and people have said, oh, well, you brought this on yourself in doing this. Well, no, this all started before I came out about it. So really all I was doing was taking additional steps to protect myself, because they were going to do me in just from having the audacity to leave in the first place. So.
Okay, when you say do you in, let's get down to it. Do you feel that you were threatened, your life was threatened? Did that enter into your mind before you left?
I did not want to really think about it, because it was enough just leaving and getting out of there that it was sort of like, well, I'll think about that tomorrow, But then tomorrow came and I had to think about it, and I knew pretty well that this was going to be something that was just going to, it never ends. It's like a soap opera, basically. And
yes.
They do things, I do things in retaliation, and we go back and forth, and it's like a giant chess game. And I suppose if I didn't have the spiritual stamina that I do, then this would have driven me crazy a long time ago. But somehow I'm able to sustain that I don't know. It's just and it's not been easy. My life is certainly not the life I knew in that environment, where I was a socialite in Dallas and I had this unlimited wealth around me to have anything I wanted. I mean, I've been teetering on broke now for the past 2 years. I've been moving around a lot. Life has been very, very difficult. And a lot of people, I hear a lot of good things from people, and they say that they want to do things to help or extend this opportunity or maybe donate something to a cause or whatever. But at the end of the day, that doesn't really happen. And so it's been me eating up what was left of my life savings and selling all the rest of the stuff that I had just to make all this possible. And now, I mean, it's like I sleep on an air mattress. I drive a 13-year-old car. So this has not been... They've attacked me and said that, oh, he's doing this for the fame and the glamour and everything. Well, yeah, I've got some fame out of this, but what glamour? It has not been nice.
Yeah, I can imagine. And I appreciate that, because we get the same thing. A lot of very well-intentioned individuals, most of the people that are the most, I guess you might say, well-intentioned, have the least amount of money, it appears. And that may just be the way of the world. At the moment, okay, there is a very strong reptilian element, and I wonder whether you ever acknowledge that up to this time.
Yeah, like I was talking about with the behind closed doors thing, once you're around those top officials and it's much more relaxed and their public face is retired for the evening, so to speak, then yeah, you see a lot of strange things happening. Now, I never saw anybody just full-blown, four-alarm shapeshift into a 8-foot-tall reptilian humanoid, but what I did see a lot of was their eyes would change. And I don't mean the slanty snake eyes. They would go to solid black, like you hear about the black-eyed kids, but grown men. And to me, that was indicative of demon possession or whatever entities that they're opening themselves up to in these rituals.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So during this time, you've been exposed to all of this. Have you now come to a place where you are being approached by positive Freemasons? In other words, there are some out there, and ones that come from a different direction who have also rebelled against the order, so to speak.
I mean, yeah, I get approached by a lot of people. I get a lot of really beautiful, very touching, like fan mail, so to speak, from them and all that. And a lot of it, I try my best to answer it as much as time allows. And I've gotten very rich, nourishing encouragement from a lot of them who really believe that, what I'm doing is hopefully going to sanitize the place, to use a lot of their words, in the future, that this sort of corruption is not the everyday part of it. I mean, because they lament, like I do, of the whole issue, what it's become. And it's just really, really sad. And it's really pathetic as well that these egos, being the way that they are, have been allowed to just run rampant and hijack the place. And it is very sad. If you're a Mason that really believes in this stuff, whether you used to or still do or whatever, I mean, it breaks your heart. It really does. But, I mean, there's not much that you can do about that, or that I can do about it, or we all can do about it, other than to take away the toy. It's just as simple as that. These guys need to have this ability to operate in secret and have corruption and people that are being blackmailed or whatever to do as they say. They need to have that mechanism taken away from them so they're no longer able to do it. And that's how you stop this and defeat this
exposing
beast.
them to the light of the day.
Exactly.
Okay. Okay. At this moment, because I have a lot of questions here in the chat, I'm going to try to start taking those questions, if that's okay with you.
Oh yeah.
Great. And I know that that actually we could have you back if you're willing, because there are a lot of other things we could discuss and go on about. As you mentioned earlier in the show, that you obviously have been part of something, a very deep, dark order that a lot of people will have questions about, that you may not be able to answer here fully. And there may be ongoing sort of revelations that you will have, well, there certainly should be anyway, putting yourself in this sort of role. And so I'd like to welcome you back at any time in the future on the show so that we could go into this in greater detail.
Yeah, I would love that opportunity, Kerry. Thank you very much. Absolutely.
Okay. All right. So at this point, I'm going to ask you the questions, even though some of them may appear to have already been answered. We didn't go into a lot of detail on your book, and there may be questions about the book that they would like to know as well. So one of the first questions is, what type of work did you do for the Masons?
Well, early on in my days of Masonry, I had various seats in what they call the officers' chairs, running the chairs in a lodge. So, I mean, I did everything from junior deacon to senior deacon to junior warden to senior warden and all that stuff. I was never a worshipful master of my lodge because by the time I could have been, I was already so deeply involved in stuff at the Scottish Rite that I just didn't have the time. And then from there, that led to other things. And then once you're in that environment, they come at you with what they call the by invitation only groups, which are just a whole slew of little sub-sects and groups within groups. And, you know, every single one is a thing that you join and take a degree or two and have a dues card and for it and all that. So, yeah.
Okay. Let me ask you about the Bushes, because you were in Texas. Did you ever meet one of the Bushes at these things? And are you aware of any of their proclivities in this area? Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're still there? We had a brief dropout. We're back.
Okay. Did you hear the question?
Yeah. Were you able to hear me start answering it, or?
No.
Okay. Yeah. Basically, from my early days in Freemasonry, I mean, I did all the various what they call the officer positions in a blue lodge.
No, we actually heard that part, but then
Okay.
I think you came to the end of that answer, or it sounded like you did anyway. Maybe it was a dropout. So we did get part of that, but and you were talking about break-off groups where you would sort of join and then get some degrees and so on. But I had asked you whether or not, you know, because you were in Texas, if you had any exposure to the Bushes.
I never personally did. Now, then again, they were moving to Dallas, W and Laura, right actually down the street from where my aunt lives. When I was moving out, so I haven't really been there to experience all of that lockdown of the neighborhood and Secret Service all over the place, like evidently my aunt is having to. But interestingly, though, I will say this. I have a very good friend who I went through all my Masonic degrees with, 1 through 32, every single one, at the same time, the same lodge, same everything, and he now works as the private chef for George W. Bush there in Dallas. And he got that job absolutely because he's a Mason.
Right. Okay. And he's a good friend of yours, you say?
Yes.
Okay. I wonder if that's going to be a problem.
I won't say anything more about him than that, or it'll cause him grief.
Yeah,
but yeah.
No, I appreciate that. Okay. We'll be right back with James Wright, and we'll try to answer some more of your questions. Thank you.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message. Guess what, man? You got the Nighthawk here, man, and I'm telling you news, information, and entertainment. And everything that is so awesome about Revolution Radio is right here for the taking. But, you know, Revolution Radio's hosts keep it hopping and rocking year-round, 24/7. And I bet you have a favorite host, or maybe you got many favorite hosts, right? And I'm also betting you didn't catch every show. So now you can order the Season 2013 podcast disc. It's all of your favorite host shows of each show, depending on who the host is, from 2013. For now, $30 per host, which means that you get the podcast of every broadcast in 2013 that your favorite host did, starting in February, actually, this year. And not only do you help fund the station by picking these up, but you help fund your favorite host's work. Because I split the proceeds of the sale with the host, less the shipping, of course. So this is just $30, and you get a DVD, data DVD, that has every podcast for the entire year. Whose podcast are you learning? Well, all you have to do is visit freedomslips.com/season 2013.htm. There's a little box. You type in your favorite host name and click pay. And when you're done, you will receive your podcast disc in 7 to 21 days, depending on the demand. Hey, man, I'm just one guy, right? Anyway, and as an added bonus, man, if you order more than 5 hosts season DVDs, I'm going to give you a free 1-year access to our daily archives. So, man, don't miss out. It's all here. It's all here. You can help us. You can help the station, help fund the station, and the host get half of it, which means you get to help fund your favorite host. I mean, how could it be better? There's no other station out here that does that. So thank you very much. This is Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, man. You're listening to the Nighthawk, and I'm telling you what, man, this is where information never, ever sleeps, including me. Revolution Radio.
Will you fight? No! We will run! And we will live!
Shame on you. This could be the greatest night of our lives. But you're gonna let it be the worst.
And I guarantee a week won't go by in your life you won't regret walking out, letting them get the best of you.
Well, I'm not going home.
We've got too far!
And I'm gonna stay right here and fight for this lost cause.
A day may come when the courage of men fails, but it is not this day.
The line must be drawn here. This far, no farther.
I'm not saying it's gonna be easy.
You're gonna work harder than you ever worked before.
But that's fine, we'll just get tougher with it.
If a person grits his teeth and shows real determination,
Failure is not an option.
That's how winning is done.
Believe me when I say we can break this army here.
And win just one for the Gipper.
Look, I say to you, what every warrior has known since the beginning of time. You've got to get mad.
I mean plumb mad dog mean.
If you would be free men, then you must fight to fulfill that promise. Let us
Cut out their living guts 1 inch at a time.
and they will know what we can do.
Let no man forget how menacing we are. We are lions.
You're like a big bear, man.
This is your time.
Seize the day. Never surrender.
victory or death.
That's the Chicago.
Who's with me?
Clap! Clap! Don't let him die! Clap!
All right, let's fly.
And gentlemen in England, now abed.
Shall know my name is the Lord. But I tell our enemies that they may take our lives, but they'll never take our Independence Day.
Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. One world coming together to bring freedom home. You don't need to expect us. We're already here.
Enter into a world unseen on Raven Star's Witching Hour. You will encounter eclectic topics from the realm of spirit brought into our matrix of truth. With your host, the Solaris Blue Raven. Solaris will bring you an array of unique guests covering topics from ghostly spirits to amazing anomalies, covert technology, UFOs, and shadowy global events.
And that's right here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, Saturdays, midnight till 2 a.m. Eastern Time. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
Let the magic rise.
Our hero claims a warrior's heart. I tell you, the Dragonborn comes with a voice-wielding power of the ancient Lord. Believe, the Dragonborn comes.
Hi there, this is Kerry Cassidy, Project Camelot, Whistleblower Radio, and voice is going hoarse here. Well, we are talking to James Wright about the whole Freemasonry experience that he's been going through and the fact that he's become a whistleblower. We are going to your questions at this time in the chat, and I'm not sure whether let's see, we went through the first question. We had just talked about the bushes just briefly there. And in terms of your background and your family, if you are part of the St. Clairs and you're also part of the Princess Diana side of the family, have you ever investigated, I know that you've gone down your bloodline, but have you ever sort of met members of your family, traveled in Europe and this sort of thing?
I did travel through Europe as an exchange student in high school, but if I was around any members of my family, I did not know it, because that's another thing about all this is it was very staunchly kept from me for most of my life, and I had to go and do my own research and time and money and all that to actually investigate it properly and get some answers. And it's really stupid because I know my family back in Texas has it all done and, in a nice little presentable format, easy to read and all of that, but it's certainly nothing that they ever wanted to share, which is even more strange when you take into account the kind of snobs that they are, and you would think with them being that way that it's something that they would want to run around and throw in people's face there in that little Dallas society world that they live in, but it's not. It's all very hush-hush, and I think that's very interesting to note about it. It's like, why, Yeah,
so. Absolutely. Well, do you still have a relationship with your family, or are you estranged?
No, completely estranged now. Partially I was estranged for many years, but when I had the falling out with the Scottish Rite and began writing that book, that finished off. My aunt came to me, and she was coming down with Alzheimer's, so she really wasn't herself. So ultimately, I don't blame her, but she did come to me and say, either burn what you've written and forget this crazy idea, or you're cut off. And I'm like, okay, well, fine. I'm going to do it anyway because I believe in doing it, and to hell with what you think. And she told me all about how my grandfather would not approve. And I was like, well, I don't care, I mean, he's not around. Come on, please give me a break.
Okay. Do you believe that you have members of your family that you would admire?
Yes, my grandmother and I were very, very close, and the only love I ever experienced in my entire extended family was from her. And she was not from money. She had very humble beginnings and, married into it basically. And I think that by the end of her life, she really had come to resent the way that everybody else had behaved. Her husband, her children, some of her grandchildren, my older cousins, and so on, because I mean their behavior was just always over the top and deplorable. And she tried to shield me from as much of that as she could, but she died when I was 16, and then that sort of protective barrier I had died with her, and then I was subjected to their BS 100% of the time.
Okay. All right. So another person wants to know what methods and ways do they recruit new non-familiar members? Used to recruit, I believe they mean, but yeah.
Well, they have a lot of, I have their whole PR manual and how they're all supposed to present themselves in the local communities and all that. And, it all has to do with this idea of charity and camaraderie and, we take a good man and make him better and blah, blah, blah. And that, really you can't prove that Masonry has ever actually made anyone's life better. So that's all just conjecture and hearsay. And that's how they do it. And a lot of the guys now, present moment, they come into it, the younger ones, actually wanting to broaden their horizons and get sort of an education, so to speak, in the metaphysical and occult, to better understand those concepts. And that's exactly what Freemasonry is a vehicle of and for. And yet they're always told to keep quiet about it and not to allow the public to see that side of it and blah, blah, blah. We're not going to talk about the pink elephant in the room. And it just turns a lot of guys off. And so they go out and pursue other things like, say, the Rosicrucians or the OTO, etc.
Okay, that are more overt, at least on this outside.
Yes. And and all of those things, you should note, they were all, it doesn't matter what you're talking about. You can even be talking about the Mormon Church, Scientology, Jehovah's Witnesses. It doesn't matter. They were all started and written by Masons. So.
Okay. And that's an interesting statement. I think some people would perhaps take issue with that, but I'm perfectly happy with that statement.
Well, perhaps, but if they do take issue with it, I would beg of them to go do their own research on that and figure out the origins of any of the things I just mentioned. It's all out there.
Okay, what's your understanding of the relationship between the Masons and the Jesuits at this time?
You have the crossover degree called Knight of Malta. That is a degree of the Scottish Rite, and it's a decoration in the Vatican. So that is where I'm Knight of Malta, so technically I'm not a practicing one, but that's where they get that correlation. And and the Vatican, they lie just as much as the Masons, because they'll sit there and say that, we don't condone Freemasonry, bad, and yet all of those cardinals and bishops are all Masons. So again, hypocrisy.
Right. Okay, so, but in terms of the Jesuit order, were you exposed to members that were Jesuits also?
Yes, my family, even though we were never really ones to find ourselves in a church on Sunday, we were Catholic, and that denomination of Catholicism was Jesuit that we were, yeah. Okay.
Did you have dealings with other lodges around the world?
Oh, all the time, because you have to understand, working in the Valley of Dallas, that's actually it's the hub of commerce for all of the Scottish Rite. They have the headquarters in D.C., but Dallas is actually bigger than D.C. That's why all their archives are kept in Dallas and everything. So we would get phone calls and emails and tour groups from all over the world coming to ask questions or tour the facilities and all of that. Yeah, Dallas, 500 Harwood Street, where the building is in downtown Dallas, was always very celebrated and sought after as a Masonic destination, or like a notch in your belt just to be able to go visit it. So yeah, we were truly the elite of the place. Yeah.
Okay. And in terms of the military, did you deal a lot with the military? Were a lot of the members part of, because you mentioned law enforcement and at the end of your sort of bio, and I wondered where that was coming from. Are you saying that a lot of the members worked in law enforcement in the Dallas chapter or whatever?
Yes, they have lodges there in Dallas. One is called East Dallas Lodge that meets at the Scottish Rite building. You can go to DallasScottishRite.org and click on calendar and you can see for yourself. But that is a lodge comprised entirely of police personnel, yes. And you also had JROTC that meets there. That's the military thing. But I was never really involved in that because it was the most conservative crowd possible to hang around with in the building, and I'm pretty liberal, and I was never really on a friends basis with those guys, and my attendance at their events would have been optional, so I just opted not to go. Okay, but I'm kind of curious because your access level sounds very interesting. It sounds still to me as though you were shielded from a lot of the more inner circles. And I'm wondering how that might have been, sort of how that might have operated around you without your knowledge. Do you think that you were knowledgeable as to it operating, but you simply weren't sort of let in on it? Or do you have any thoughts on that? Yeah, I mean, that's a good way of putting it. I think that there were a lot of cases where there might have been a certain kind of a discussion or a problem or whatever that I was just simply never involved in because I guess they had an attitude that I was still this young kid, which, I mean, I was. So I guess they didn't want to rock the boat with me being on it in some ways. But then again, I mean, I don't know of any cases where, like, I've obviously not taken the 33rd degree, but yet I've been handed the script and read it 1,000 times because they had me redoing the lighting schematics for it in the theater in the building. So they obviously felt fine to trust me with stuff like that, which they guard so closely. Well, to some degree, what I've heard is what really goes on the sort of the deeper levels, which is extremely dark, happens above 33rd degree. Well, the 33rd is a red herring. I mean, that's just 1 degree, and it's certainly not the highest, and it's certainly not the only honorary one that can be had. So, right. To say that a person has access based on whether or not they are a 33rd is completely illogical. So, because, I mean, actually, when I speak about this stuff, I always try to make the point, so many people that claim that they come out of that environment, they can't even name the place. And the name of your so-called Illuminati is the Order of the Silver Star, or where you see the initials AA. That's exactly what that is. And it was set up to be that way by a bunch of Masons, Crowley included, and other figures from the Golden Dawn like McGregor Mathers and the name escapes me at the moment, but you get the picture. Oh, yeah, absolutely. But what I'm saying is that, again, what I'm saying is that above the level of 33 and above, but certainly above 33, in other words, the access level. So since you hadn't reached that access level yet, I mean, for example, your father had to have been a Mason, right? Actually, he was not. He was in occult orders, but the Masons was not one of them. It was my grandfather who was heavily involved in the Scottish Rite, a former chairman of their board. His painting hung over the fireplace at the library in Dallas. Yeah, he was way into it. Okay. So what is your father part of a break-off group? Well, there's all sorts of little magical orders and things that exist that a lot of people don't know the names of or whatever.
Yes.
And I mean, I don't know the full extent of what he was involved in. That'd be a question for my mother, and she's never told the truth about any of it since day one. And I never actually got a chance to meet my father, and he died of suicide, so I will unfortunately never be able to ask.
I see. Okay. Interesting. All right. So let me see. Somebody, I guess I'll read this. It's somebody named Alien Rain says the Order of the Knights Templar says to James Wright, be careful what you say.
Okay, well, the little trolling is funny and all that. I'm a St. Clair. It is in your own history books of your order that say that St. Clairs are the hereditary protectors of craft masonry, so be careful what you say to me, actually. That's what I have to say in response to that.
Okay. The next question is, are origins of Masonic ritual from ET culture, and what is the purpose for today's world? Is the influence less strong? I assume that they mean now as opposed to in his past history.
You mean the influence of ET stuff, culture?
No, of Masonic ritual. In other words, of the Masonic, the Masons in general. I'm just reading this question here. So the first part of the question asks you, are the origins of the Masonic rituals from ET culture? Is that your understanding?
The true origins, I was on the body at the Scottish Rite called the Research Society, which that's all they do is they sit around and play scholarly professor whatever all day long and try to trace, as far back the origins of it all as they can. And the fact of the matter is, when you get back to the time of Christ, there is no way to continue tracing it in a coherent way. And I might add that there is absolutely zero proof that has ever been offered by science or archaeology or what have you that there was a King Solomon who had a Cecil B. DeMille style King Solomon's Temple and this chap called Hiram Abiff who designed it all. There is absolutely no proof of that whatsoever. So it's all just, again, Masonic conjecture, and their motifs and symbology is all built around that. That's great, but I mean, really, like I said earlier, it seems to me that it's nothing more than a cheap mirroring and retelling of the story of Christ, but with Christ conveniently deleted. Okay.
What is the purpose for today's world? Is the influence less strong?
No, the influence is certainly still there. I mean, their power lies in the power of networking. So who is it that they have on payroll? Like, if you want me to be really naughty, I'll make an example. There's a state judge in Texas by the name of John Marshall who is on payroll at the Scottish Rite for no clear reason, but he is. And I think we can all figure out what the reason is. It's called, be in league with us and stuff like that. There was another guy, Brother Ed Milkey, who ran a huge venture capital and investment firm there in Dallas called Milkey Ferguson, and it's all gone away now because they were shut down from crimes they were found guilty of by the SEC and insider trading and all of that, and that actually happened pretty recently. I mean, the list goes on, and
Sure.
Another former Scottish Rite official there in Texas is Wendell Miller, who's the former head of the state troopers in Texas, if that gives you any clue to where this is going. So,
well, there's also a very strong link to the intelligence agencies. Are you aware of that?
Yes, they do their recruiting from the ranks of the 32nd degree. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Order of the Eastern Star. Can you address this part of Freemasonry is a question.
Really briefly, I don't mean to insult any of the sweet ladies that are actually a part of that, and there are, because the wool has been pulled over their eyes, and that's what the whole point of the place is. It's a lodge support body. So, in other words, make the coffee, cook the dinners, clean up the dishes, and don't ask questions. That's what the whole point is. So, You're not going to find a lot of conspiracies in Eastern Star. I went and did Eastern Star with some of my Mason friends just to see what it was like, and it was basically a coffee and bridge clatch. So.
Right. Okay. Well, they're probably witches, though. I imagine they are practicing, So
they have some women in their ranks that are into that, but like I said, the true name of the Illuminati is Order of the Silver Star, and actually, there's a line in the Apprentice Degree of Freemasonry that gives that away when it says Freemasonry is more honorable than the Star and Garter or any other order that can be conferred at this or any future period by king, prince, or potentate. And that's a reference blatantly to the recipient of the Order of the Garter, headed by Queen Elizabeth, the true owner of York Rite Freemasonry, and the Order of the Silver Star. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Except that if you do study the occult, you'll see that women and the woman feature very prominently, especially in the Crowley literature.
Oh, very much so. That's why it's really kind of ridiculous why the Masons don't let women in their ranks, because all of these other higher bodies that are attached to the octopus structure of it do. And so it just really doesn't make any sense. And
in a sense, it's a power. It's a boys' club. I mean, they're trying to hold on to their own power, and obviously there's sort of a level of control being exercised in so doing, in keeping women out of it. But it would never maintain sort of the absurdity that it does. There's also a huge homosexual element, and I wanted to ask you about, the disappearance of children, even with respect to the lodge you were part of, whether you ever were aware of, child sacrifice in the area, in the lodges themselves, etc.
There was, yes, to answer that in short, it goes on absolutely all over the world. As far as what I was directly exposed to there in Dallas, there was an instance back in the 80s where the Secretary General there in Dallas, the guy who later on that I had as my boss by that title, he was a pedophile, it came out, and he had been molesting and abusing boys from the DMLA chapter at the Scottish Rite building there in Dallas in the 80s. And all of the records, it's all been swept under the rug. All the people involved, except the kids that were the victims, are dead. But all of the records are sealed up across the street from the Dallas Scottish Rite building in their abandoned building on Yonge Street.
Thank you very much for being on the show, James. Be safe, and perhaps we can do this again in the near future.
I'd love to. Thank you.